So I'm Jen Schwartz. I'm with Access Intelligence, and I am your renewed moderator for today. We're going to talk about kind of 2020, like what people are seeing, what you're doing, how you're changing up things. We're now 2 years into the new normal. I think variants are probably here to stay for a bit. Hopefully this newest one doesn't sound like it's quite as deadly as some of the other variants have been, but I kind of wanted to start off with that and just find out, what people are hearing from their constituents about the Omicron virus, and if that's affecting any of your events planned for the first quarter. I can say on my end, we are hearing people asking questions about it. What are we doing? We're having to reinforce the fact that we're still requiring vaccines and or a negative COVID test to attend our events. Our employees are still wearing masks 100% of the time when we're not eating or drinking at events. That seems to have helped in many of our actual marketplaces where people feel a little safer going if they know that people have been vaccinated. We're still trying to do the best we can on site. We had an event last week. We had people serving the food. We kept spacing different, separate so that people weren't on top of each other. We gave plenty of room for people to sit, only so many at a table. But yeah, it's definitely an issue, especially for those of you that might have some international clients that are trying to decide if they're willing to, go through the hassle of traveling, getting on a plane, having to have a 24-hour test beforehand, yada, yada. So with that, I'll open it up to what folks are hearing, and then we can kind of go into a couple other areas after that. Andy?
Yeah, I'm sort of straddling the Atlantic, which is an interesting balancing point. But yeah. I'm sure Helen's seeing the same thing, obviously, in the UK. I just spoke to one of my colleagues this morning who's triple vaccinated, and he's caught Omicron. Albeit he has sniffles, but as he said this morning, if this thing is 4 times as infectious, but only a third of the people end up in hospital, that still means it's worse from a hospital perspective than it was when we started this whole process. So for countries like the UK, which is a country with it's a healthcare system with a country attached, that's pretty devastating, to be honest with you. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, we've also been doing events in Europe and talking to venues over there. They're losing events again very rapidly. So that's not good news. So I guess the picture is not uniform, and even in the US, it's not uniform, because if you're in Florida, gung ho. If we're in the Northeast or the West, oh my God, we're in terrible danger again. So you're going to have to roll with the punches through 2022, yeah. I think.
So you said you're hearing from attendees. Is it the end users, or is it the sponsors and exhibitors, or both? Like people that are not
willing to go to shows?
Yeah.
I've heard both. Exhibitors pulling out depending on the country they're coming from in most cases, and attendees pulling out on the basis of their level of concern over the virus. But that's leading organizers basically to have to take a decision to cancel or reduce or whatever it may be. But I mean, another interesting one, we just attended an event in Orlando, which is international, but very heavily US based. They took a mask mandate off when the mandates changed, and immediately had 2,000 people sign up for the event, saying we were waiting for the mandate to come off. However, 4,000 who registered didn't come in. So, I don't know what this means, to be honest with you. It just means I think it's uncertain, and it remains uncertain. We're just going to have to go with it.
Do folks have a lot of meetings scheduled for early 2022?
This is Kevin, and we have our first event is scheduled for June, and then we have a couple in November. The ones in November, we're we have one for faculty or administrators in November for leadership, and then we have one for student leadership. The student leadership was in November was poorly attended, but we expected that because, you know, it's an international event, but it's in Orlando, so we had that going for us. So things were, like I said, not as well attended as we'd hoped, but that hasn't dissuaded us at all from the coming year. I guess we're, you know, to be determined depending on Omicron or any other variant going forward. I've spoken to many institutions of higher education, and some of them are adamant about moving away from online teaching and bringing everybody back. So, I mean, it's a mixed bag. And these are not necessarily Florida schools. These are East Coast schools. There's some Midwest schools, and one is a government type military school that's going to be completely face to face. So, which I find interesting since it's, you know, probably federally funded. And that's their attitude. So, you know, we're taking a wait and see attitude. We do a lot of our stuff both virtually and online. I mean, virtually and in person. So we're not planning on changing anything at this point. However, I'm here to find out, you know, if you folks know stuff that I don't know. And that's basically, you know, I wanted to let you know where we were, but that's what we're doing right now.
Well, I can tell you, I just booked my trip to San Diego for January for the event we have, and it was $300 from Washington, which is like ridiculously cheap. And if that tells you anything, I mean,
that's fantastic. What? Well, I'm sorry. That caught me out of left field. How? What time of year are you going to San Diego? That's never a cheap flight.
I know.
That's great.
And in about a month, yeah, we have our first event January 24th, the 25th.
That's awesome for your attendees. I mean, that's really promising.
Yeah, we actually have had, I mean, events all the way up until last week. I would say, generally speaking, though, for almost all of our events, we saw between 50 to 75% of the people that we would have had in 19 or in early 2020 before the variant. So
did they have flight delays, and was that causing a problem with attendance? Because there were so many canceled flights last month.
No, it's just what people are talking about. Like, you know, either you have companies doing travel bans, and sometimes at the last minute, right? They're changing as much as the states are with wear a mask, don't wear a mask, get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. I mean, the companies are doing the same thing. I mean, California just went back yesterday to a mask mandate for anybody indoors. That's supposed to expire January 15th. I'm sure that'll get extended. The airlines extended theirs. So yeah, I agree with Andy. It's sort of like you just have to kind of ride the wave and, you know, do the best you can with the information you have.
And I think it's very audience specific as well. So, you know, on the academic side, it's different from somebody in another space. I think that interesting number for the airlines is fascinating. I mean, probably indicates a drop in demand, quite dramatic drop in demand, because we work with the airline training industry, and they were flat-footed, frankly, when the demand surged. They couldn't keep up, hence the lack of flights. It's a roller coaster for them too, and very difficult for them to plan. So, you know, if you see the numbers going up in terms of cost of flight, obviously demand is good.
Hi, Jennifer.
I'm trying to.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's Deborah Chipman. I'm not on camera because I'm in a car, so apologies for that. But I just learned this morning about JP Morgan's big biotech pharma event in January. They instituted a policy that you had to be in person to maintain your slot at the event. And this morning, some of the big biotechs have started dropping out unless they go virtual and allow them to present virtually. So I think that's going to heavily impact their attendance because they're mandating that they be in person.
Agreed. Yeah.
I'm trying to pull together.
Oh, sorry, Brian. Bruce.
That's okay. I'm trying to pull together the retreat for Renewed here, and focusing on Miami and locales, and the feedback I'm getting from every place is that they're still going full bore, blinders are on, right? And everything spilled into this year. So it's tough to find a venue that has even a small space for us. And they've got large conferences going. The Bitcoin convention is going to be in there like the 6th, the 9th of April and so forth. So I'm kind of scratching and clawing, trying to find a place that would suit about 25 people. And it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens. But the feedback I'm getting is that, yeah, every place is booked from, 12,000 place attendees to 50. So it's going to be interesting. So.
I apologize.
That might be one of them right now.
I have to go on mute because we have people working here and all I hear is drywall in the background. So I'll try to mute so you guys don't hear it too. But yeah, good point, Bruce. And that actually gets to David's question in the chat. Are people renegotiating with venues? And I can tell you, yes, we are trying, but they are not nearly as willing to negotiate as they were when it first happened. I think it's because all of us, right? We probably aren't willing to negotiate as much as when it first happened. I think everyone is feeling the effects of years of this now, and people are trying to hold on to as much as they can. But we've had, some success. Sometimes if it's an attrition issue with hotel rooms, we may pay a little more in catering, or if we can agree that, hey, let us go down below minimums on catering, but we'll book now for 2022 or 23. That sometimes helps. So like to hear what others are hearing.
Yeah, we renegotiated to a very, very low level in the peak of the COVID period. So we're in a decent position now. We can afford to up our catering costs to offset some of these room numbers, which frankly we can't go to. But the venues we're dealing with have been very understanding. Perhaps it's because we've been dealing with some of them for a very long period of time and they want to keep, established clients. But again, it's the individual experience is going to be individual, unfortunately.
Is anyone worried about speakers? They've gotten so used to this being asked to speak virtually for 15 minutes, 45 minutes. I'm concerned moving forward that some of these people are going to be like, you know what, I'll do your conference, but I'm going to do it virtual. You're going to have to wire me in by either video or, I'm going to have a different experience. And some of these people, one of them in my event last week came in through Bergdorf Goodman's. She was sitting at lunch at Bergdorf Goodman's as a speaker in the event. And I thought, oh my God, is this where we're headed? You're one of my main speakers for the top of the show. And I was oh shit, the audio. And people are like, this is really distracting. And the comments in the chat box, my God, I was like, oh yeah, I'm really sorry, but I think those are dishes. Yeah, those are definitely knives and forks, and and I was like, I don't really know what to say. I was like, and people were like, the client was like, you got to mute that. And I'm like, well, if we mute that, we mute her. I was like, well, I don't know what we do here, so you do sort of like, there was the fun cachet of like, look, I'm just zooming in from Bergdorf Goodman's lunch hour. But there was the question in my mind of, is this going to become a problem down the road? Like, I don't know.
Horrible. That is just horrible. What terrible etiquette that is. Like, shame on that person, first of all. It's like, I don't know how big of a name this person was, but I would have been like, I'm sorry, but we need to cancel this meeting. I apologize to all of my venues. We will rebook when our guest speaker can accommodate us. That is terrible.
Thankfully, it was a group discussion, but still, you're like, what the hell am I dealing with? And is this going to become a repeat problem?
I think I have a similar question. I don't necessarily have that same problem. I think that for us, I'm with Simplify Compliance, and we're in a healthcare association venue, and our customers, our members are very dedicated. They're there for the education, and our speakers love sharing their stories. So we did have an event in October, and we had a number of last minute cancellations, but we had plan A, B, C, and D to substitute out speakers for anyone that had to cancel last minute. And we'll do the same for our in-person conference coming up in May. But I am concerned about that sort of same idea about people getting used to Zooming and having the option to Zoom, and then waiting until the nth hour to be like, oh, I'm sure that they're going to switch to virtual last minute and not booking, and us being like, oh, well, no, we're really in person, and then losing that extra, bump or whatever, that people have sort of gotten used to the virtual option, and wanting to be able to access that when we really need them for all of those points you guys were just saying about the venue, the cost of the venue, the food, all the rest of that. We need them to be there in person.
Yeah, we had that issue a lot in the fall, because we had probably, I don't know, we backfilled the fall with like 40 events easily across the company. And really what we decided, each of our brands did a little something different, but for us, we're like, I finally just had to say it's in person. And I said to our brand leaders, unless it's a VIP, unless it's like the president of the United States, like they're not going to be allowed to be virtual, right? So if we had end users, if we had like very, very high level people that would want to come in on video, then we would allow it. But the problem is it's so much more. The AV has skyrocketed this year, just absolutely skyrocketed. And we just can't do it for all of these breakout rooms we have. Like we just had to kind of make a decision that only in a very rare instance would we allow it. And it had to be something where the people wanted to hear from them, and the Q&A could be that way. But I agree with you, Melissa. I mean, otherwise, yeah, I would take that too, probably, if I didn't have to travel, spend 3 days and go somewhere, be easier to get on for 30 minutes, but that's not the benefit. So
we also have more than 40 local chapters across the country that are volunteer led, and they're trying to get their events up and running again. And they're looking to us for advice, obviously. And in the past, I have always said, go in person or go virtual, and don't do a hybrid, because all of the folks who are like last minute lazies are saying, oh, well, I'll get on, and then not show up at the last minute because work came up or something. But the people who have invested the time to drive to the event, took the time off of work to go to the event, and all of the volunteers that put the time in to organize the event, and then to have, all those last minute lazies not really invest their time. I didn't think that was fair for the whole of the environment in the organization. People have, dedicated their time to create this event for you, come or don't come.
Yeah, and I would say the exception we made where we have a higher education event that we put on, and we did allow for people to get on-demand access after the fact, because we had a lot of colleges that wanted to be there in person and they just simply couldn't be there. So that actually generated some nice revenue for us on the back end, where we gave them access to, we filmed, taped everything and put it on a virtual platform, but it was not live streamed at the same time. But yeah, like I said, every event, maybe 1 or 2, you might get people that ask, or you may decide like, okay, I'll let a speaker come in. But we've also found, and it's not optimal, but you could also pre-tape. Again, not the best, but that has been in something where somebody might pre-tape 10 minutes, and then the moderator on stage will talk through it. So others, I think, Andy, were you going to say something before? Or somebody?
I actually want to,
Kevin.
I just want to note that a lot of our customers are getting younger and younger, and they're used to being virtual. Even if they're in a restaurant, they're talking to each other via text across the table. So virtual is probably, to them, it's going to be more comfortable whether we have COVID or not. So that's just something, I think that's going to be something that goes forward in the future, and live events, in-person events might be a thing of the past going forward, especially with all.
Oh my God, Kevin, don't say that.
I understand.
Who's your client? Who's your main target audience, Kevin?
Higher education faculty and administrators.
Higher education. Interesting.
So I mean, the older crowd, and I am among the older crowd, don't enjoy travel as much, because it's not as much fun to sit for hours in an airport and get on a plane. And so if they can sit in their home in their bathrobe and attend the conference, they do that. And then the younger folks are virtual. I just think it's something that needs to be part of the conversation, because generationally things are different across the spectrum. So Matthew, I completely agree with you. You know, face to face is the best way to do it, but with everything else going on, there isn't as much handshaking or hugging or even non-masked interactions. And at least, you know, in most cases, you can see people's faces over the, you know.
I'm feeling a little talkative today, I guess. I think you guys all mentioned in one of the meetings here in this group previously that the elevated networking touch of in-person over virtual is leaning towards smaller networking groups like this one, and then being able to elevate that and continue that throughout the course of the year, so that maybe in-person events aren't going away, but they're taking a different structure and tone. Again, our October event was successful in a different way than just pure monetarily. We had a much smaller audience, but the audience then had a real interconnected feel. There was about 500 people, I think, total, when we're usually at about 1,500. But people were able to really dive into conversations a little bit more. It was quieter, it was manageable, you know, they were able to build these networks. And I think, again, you know, in one of the discussions that we had here in this forum previously, it was also about how do we leverage different segments of our audience to maintain these networking groups, have them in things like the Zoom, and then leverage those into in-person, where that those side conversations can happen in a more natural way.
Yeah.
Can I share what we're doing with Renewed International with the events? I'll just put my hand down. It's the first time I've put my hand up like that in a Zoom call. I don't know. There we go. That way. What we're planning to do, and I don't know if you all heard of Renewed International, but it's basically a new group we've set up within Renewed that is catering specifically for companies that have either got quite strong international presence already or want to grow internationally, or want to launch some new, you know, initiatives or take their products internationally. So the topic is going to be very, very focused on those particular kind of strategies. And what we've decided to do, and we haven't publicized this yet, is that we're doing 8 virtual roundtables on always, it's going to be the first Wednesday of every month. Not every month, obviously, because there's only 8 of them, so we're missing some months. And then at the evening after the roundtable will happen in the afternoon. And in the evening, we're having a dinner in London, but only for a select group of the more kind of the leaders, we're calling them, so CEOs, founders, MDs, to create that really valuable networking space where they really just want to be around their peers. So one's that really open to all, the other one's quite exclusive for reasons that some people might not agree with, but actually it's important to have those leaders, give those leaders space to have those discussions. We're probably not going to run, there was one for 2nd of February, we planned the first virtual roundtable and the dinner. We're probably not going to do the dinner on the 2nd of Feb, but the first one will be 2nd of March probably. And it's a bit of an experiment, you know, and so we're doing the virtual event, the virtual roundtables, kind of behind closed doors, Chatham House rule, which means that they're not going to be recorded like this one is, but someone will write an article which basically says, you know, outlines the takeaways and what was shared, but not attributing to anyone. That will be made available. So instead of a video, there'll be this article that everyone can read. And then the dinners as well will be quite confidential, and we're planning to have seating plans where people arrive, they network, mingle, sit down at different tables, and then we move them around between courses. And we've had a lot of really kind of positive response so far from the people we've talked about this, but obviously still early days, and we haven't, you know, run them yet and properly tested the whole model. But I think it's a good example of how, sorry, one more point to make about this is the relationships. What I'm hoping will happen, and what I think will be really beneficial is the relationships that people will start building, because they are seeing each other 2 or 3 times a year at these leaders dinners, and then also being able to engage online in the virtual roundtables and hear from other viewpoints who aren't people aren't leaders, or the more kind of vendor type attendees and participants. So we'll let you know how that goes, but it is very flexible as well. So we only have to confirm the venue. People are just paying for their own food, is how the money's going to work. The costs are going to work, and the covering those costs. But it's kind of, I think we could probably confirm to the people attending and to the venue a week before, which means that, and even if the dinner doesn't happen, if someone's traveled from the US to time their visit with the dinner, they could still maybe meet up with some of the people who they would have met anyway, who might be around. So it's not, I'm not sure that we have to be worried about that particular setup, and I'd be interested to hear from other people who are planning those kind of more dinner type networking events, as opposed to the kind of content-led events as well. I don't know if anyone's doing anything similar.
No, but it's a good idea. This is the sort of community piece, sort of coming together. Yeah.
And also obviously on Guild we'll have the same.
Yeah.
Everything reflected and reinforced.
It makes huge sense if you actually want to discuss subject matter. I think, I don't know quite where Matthew's coming from, but Kevin, I think on the academic side, we deal with training on a day-to-day basis, and it's been very obvious that if you're only coming to learn something, you don't have to come to do that. You can do that online. So I think those associations, which are basically CME or whatever led, could have a real problem in the future, but they'll probably be able to charge their attendees the exorbitant sums for not attending anyway. So who cares? But for others, for others like us and you, we need people to be able to sit down and understand what the heck's going on in our business. So
I think this is Melissa from Simplify. I think there are lanes for all of these going forward, depending on the individual preference and the client type and the member type, etc. I think there will always be a place for us to have our big in-person conference. Again, COVID has shown us, people's adaptability and willingness, as well as the risks are involved, but also these various other options for us to take deep dives. The challenge, I think, comes in balancing the different types of efforts and then the different plans for monetizing those efforts. One of the things that we have done over the past almost 4 or 5 years now is a leadership channel that is sponsor driven, and we get a couple of sponsors to dedicate themselves to our leadership council, and they meet 4 or 5 times a year virtually, and then they have an in-person exchange, which is about 35 people, and then they sit at round tables throughout the course of the day, and they have different topics that they're discussing, and then they have a big fancy dinner and an outing and that kind of a thing. So it's similar to what Helen is sort of talking about, but that's a sponsorship driven model in both the online venues and meetings that we have, as well as the in-person. So it's really interesting about all of these different types of events that we've been able to develop, and how we're going to sort of match those up with revenue channels.
I do think they can fit together though as well, because I think so what you're mentioning about those big annual events, I do think there's a place for them, and I do think people will attend them in person, but they're more likely to attend them if they've already got some other relationships, touch points throughout the year. So what I'm hoping will happen is that by attending those dinners, you will get more attendees to the event that Bruce is organizing, and the one in June as well. Because people, those relationships is what brings people together, and that real sense of community that makes them leave. Why do people, get off their sofas at home and go to a hall to go and mingle with others, down the road? It's the same. I think it's the same logic. It's got to feel like a lot of it's to do with how it makes them feel and that sense of belonging. So yeah, I think those annual events for proper communities will do well, and they are sponsorable, those ones, and the value of their sponsorship is very high.
I think you just, absolutely hit the nail on the head, Helen. I think, when you're not just building an educational event, you're building a sense of community, and you're building transactional events that help them become a part of that community, but you're creating a funnel for them professionally, for them to develop themselves professionally over time. And depending on how their professional track leads is where we need to provide tools and materials for them so that they can network effectively. Folks often say that they hate missing out on our conference because they only get to see their friends that one time a year.
Yeah.
I think maybe I like your avenues concept, Melissa, because I think it does imply more touch points with different segments. So those of us who are lucky enough to have one big event in an area, we're now going to have multiple tracks or multiple avenues, as you said. And I always think it's worth recognizing that you can maximize the revenue there, but after a year of investing in tech platforms and that sort of thing, I think all of us are trying to manage the cost side to, on the assumption that overall things might be a little smaller, but they might be more profitable if we're really careful with the venues, all those sort of things. So it feels a little more complex, but I think this new normal that's going to come out of this is going to end up being a little bit more profitable if we're careful about it, but it's the 25-person segment and the 50-person segment and the 250-person segment, and having a sense of what to do on each of those and how to maximize them.
Yeah, and I think Kevin and Andy kind of alluded to this as well, but this whole community issue that Melissa and Helen were talking about, I think that's key, right? You shouldn't be thinking of an event as an event. It should be your community for that marketplace. And they don't want to have touch points just 3 days a year. They want to have touch points all year, but you obviously, you're not going to be in person all year, but that's where you can kind of solve other challenges. If you have people that really can't travel, don't want to travel, well, great. Have some webinars throughout the year, have other opportunities for them to connect. If you do want to be in person, and I can guarantee you, everyone that showed up at our events, I can't tell you how many people thanked us. Our NPS scores went way up, even though we had not as many people as before. The people that showed up were the people that wanted to be there, and they, in many cases, were the spenders. They were the buyers, right? They weren't the kick the tires, let me try this event out. They were like, no, I'm going during a pandemic, so I'm coming. And so that part's been great. But yeah, it's different. It's smaller, it's more intimate. And I totally agree with you, David. If you can figure out a way to not have to go back to the exorbitant, catering fees and attrition and rooms and all that stuff that you have to do to get this hotel space or convention center space, it's so much better, I think.
Yeah.
And it's lower risk, right, as well. There's less risk in a year-round model, if I'm
sure a bunch of you have had, this is more anecdotal, but there was a meetup in New York last week that I attended, and it was 4:30 to 6:30. And I got a note from one of the organizers that there were still about 15 people at midnight, just as a, silly anecdote, but it shows the kind of energy there is around people seeing each other for the first time in 2 years, So just warning, if you end up in a bar with your meeting people, you might be there for a very long night if that hasn't happened to you already. So, but hopefully Helen, to your point, there's, you sort of have to plan to capitalize on that somehow, you know, recognize that for certain segments, there's that kind of energy going on.
I'm sorry. I have a question. Has anybody gotten feedback from their clients after one of these events that there's been an outbreak of new cases, you know, significant to that event? Anybody at all?
We had a few events where there were maybe 1 or 2 people that let us know after the fact, and then we send out a note saying that this person, you know, someone at the event tested positive. But no outbreaks, nothing more. I mean, if you're talking about 500 people in an event, maybe we had 1 or 2 that might have mentioned it, and that's well within the range of what the rest of the country is seeing. Yeah.
We haven't either, but you know, I didn't want to just presume that the rest of you are dodging the same bullets. So that's good.
And I think that's where you really, like, we have it on our website, all the things we're doing, and you know, we try really hard. I mean, that's the best you can do, right? You can have sanitizer out, you have masks at the front waiting for people that need them. You set people far apart, you require the vaccination. Like, we're doing everything we possibly can to make it as safe as possible. And I think people do appreciate that, but yeah, nothing's foolproof.
Yeah.
Luckily, knock on wood, we haven't seen any large outbreaks or anything.
No, we were in Berlin for our last event, and that was very heavily managed, as you would expect. So either you had to be vaccinated and provide proof, or you had to be recovered and provide proof. If neither of those and you still attended, then you had to be tested every day. So we had about 750 people in, and we know of about 8 cases as a result, including one of our own staff. But I have a feeling it might well be that 2 in the morning bar experience where perhaps your guard drops a little. And most everybody said it could have been on the flight, could have been anywhere. We're not blaming you guys, but it's, you know, you have to know just in case the numbers get a bit big. I think the other thing we've found is it's amazing what happens when you can't afford to do things you used to be able to do. When people don't sponsor drinks, for example, and you think, oh dear, this is going to be a problem, and you turn around and say, I'm sorry, it's a cash bar, folks. It did no effect at all. Everybody was just so keen to get together. So we're not going to be spending money on that in the future. And as for speakers, I mean, you know, now and again, being able to get somebody to attend who you really want, or at least to present who you really want to present, but they can't attend, I think it's a plus. I mean, you can get away with 1 or 2, or we can anyway, get away with 1 or 2 virtual presentations, as long as the vast majority are in person. So this has opened up a few opportunities for us, as much as it's causing us problems, frankly.
I have a question sort of related to what Andy is saying, in terms of you all going forward back to in-person events. So I'm thinking more about our main conference. Are you doing anything differently in terms of a networking perspective to help make the attendees connect with that energy? So we've all just said that people are very excited to be back together. They're very jazzed and motivated. If they're putting down the money to attend, and they know they want to attend and they're excited about it. We're looking at new ways and new ideas to amp up the networking capabilities inherent in a larger event, multiple track, 1,000+ people. And wondering if any of you are doing anything like that, or have thought about that.
Do you already have like a first timers happy hour, or do you walk people around the show floor, anyone that's new for the first time?
Yeah,
that helps for sure.
Yeah, we had a couple of ideas that we have been tossing around, is having moderators, the room moderators, have additional training to be networking facilitators, so that as people are coming into the room, that 15 minutes or so of people, you know, coming in the room where they would just be sitting there or looking at their notes, facilitating conversations as people come in with meaningful, you know, this session is about this. What are you doing about this? And what are you doing about this as people are coming in, as people are coming into the room? Fishbowl, take a card, leave a card things at the back of each track room was another idea.
Did you
Have
do you
done
do
the,
round tables? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say round. I mean, maybe I missed this, or you said it and I didn't understand it in the right way. But do you do like round tables where you seat people around particular topics that they discuss?
Don't at the large conference. It's difficult to manage with 1,000+ people. There is some talk about trying to do that during one of the networking breaks in the exhibit hall, but then it's time away from the exhibitors, which is a little bit of a challenge too.
We used to do those when I worked many years ago in ICBI, which was part of Informa, which it's a shame Deborah's gone. She was part of the same organization. And she would remember we used to run these large kind of 2,000 person events in large venues like the Grimaldi Forum in Monaco. And we used to have these round tables and call them champagne round tables and serve champagne. So it was at the end of the day and you could have a beer if you wanted to, or champagne. And we would use that to kind of draw the people in. And then we would deliberately, the staff would go around. We had a word for it, positive seating. Don't know if you've maybe this is commonly used, I don't know, where we would deliberately go and kind of herd people to their tables and then they'd kind of switch. And, these were large numbers. These were over 1,000 people. And we did it 15 years ago and they're still incredibly popular, I believe, in those same events that are still running now. And people, that's what they turn up for. That's what's making them turn up at events now, where before they, if those roundtables weren't happening, they'd probably just want to join online.
Very cool.
And in that same vein, you could do product theaters in the morning before the exhibit hall opens, sponsored, right? So each exhibitor or some of your top sponsors that want to do a product demonstration or have a talk, you could have your breakfast across 2 or 3 different rooms and have people come in that way to engage.
Yeah,
great idea.
Food and drink. I do think even if it's free or paid for, if it's there, people turn up.
Bruce, did you want to say something before? Oh, you're good. Okay. All right, so we've talked a little bit about some of the sponsors, Omicron, hotels. I'm actually curious, what are people doing to get more attendees to the events? Because we found sponsors and exhibitors were like signed up on day one, right? They're like, oh my gosh, you're live, I'm in. Speakers, super excited. It's the end users. It's the people we need there for all those folks that have been harder to get them, I think to Kevin's point, to get them out of their homes, to get them on a plane, showing the value. Anybody have any tricks in their marketing efforts or ways that they were able to get the end users to come to their events this past fall, or what you're doing upcoming for the
$300 flights to San Diego sure helps.
Well, I know, exactly, right?
I mean, really, that's unbelievable. That was all joking aside. That was like, wow.
No, that's a hell of a, that's going to really improve things. But if you mean exclusively for in person, that's harder. It's going to be about comfort level. With it, I noticed. I worked with a client that for the past couple of weeks have been sending really loud, brightly colored emails that I found offensive and horrible that were really good. They had 100% increase the week of the event from what were really paltry numbers, didn't look good the week prior, to a full, with the last week, they sent 2 emails, one on Monday and then the event was on Thursday. And that with bright colors, full spectrum colors, so that your whole email was just blasted with color and headshots, focusing on multiple speaking sessions, all in one, your link at the top to register, and it worked real nicely. I was kind of surprised it worked. I'll be honest with you. I would have not responded, but people loved it. These were realtors. So if anybody here is doing realty, I was amazed by their enthusiasm for this kind of communication.
It's interesting.
That's
Isn't it?
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we found 40% of our registrations are in the last 2 weeks. So whether this is just people waiting to be absolutely sure they can participate, that could have something to do with it. Yeah, it's
Is that for in person or virtual?
In person. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd wait that long. Your tickets are too expensive. It's
well,
amazing people do that.
Our guys are mostly airline people, but I guess again, it's, you know, if you're going to buy a hotel room, it's not that difficult at the moment, and equally well, you know, airline tickets are not ridiculous, and it's probably far better to buy later and be sure you can get there than buy early and try and get the money back.
True.
I mean, we've started to do some things. We did a whole series of webinars last year, working groups and webinars similar to what you've been discussing, as a way of keeping the audience engaged, and that seems to have paid off significantly this year. So we'll certainly be keeping that. The other sort of thing that we've tended to get into is a sort of almost like a sponsored buyer program. So those people who are really important to just about all of our exhibitors, and ours is an exhibition and conference, which is another wrinkle. We've been inviting this year free of charge, which has been a bit painful, but we'll be inviting at a very low cost next year, and that's worked incredibly well.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth with that. Whenever I go free at it, I get a lot of people to sign up and then not as many to show up. But then when you do like a $99 or $50, sometimes it's a little better. But I'll be interested to hear how that goes, because we're in the same boat. Sometimes we do open it up, just special invitations to our end users to try to get them there.
We also get all our clients, well, not all, we'd like to get all our clients, only about 40% bother, to invite people they want to see at the show. And this year, This year we went out ourselves and identified people that we knew we had to have there, because the other problem working with clients is they leave it very late, which doesn't, doesn't help build that anticipation.
Is that like forgive me for being a little parochial, but is that like invite a friend? Like, are you coming to the conference and bring a friend?
That too, but no, this is highly specific. This is a directly targeted, hey, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, we and our clients, or our clients would love to see you at the event. There's a free pass for you, or there's a cheap pass for you, whichever.
Gotcha.
VIP program, sponsored delegates, whichever you like.
Anyone else? Any marketing tips or sponsor exhibitor?
What I've seen a lot of companies doing is being quite specific about who is going to be in the room, and publishing, usually, not only the speakers, but the companies and kind of job titles, job functions of the people who are turning up. I don't think they can publish actually, the actual names. And in so doing, I think the belief is that if you do that, obviously more people will turn up because they can see other people aren't going to be there, but also that the companies that are mentioned on the list are more likely to turn up because someone has said they're going to be there. So there's kind of a bit of, I don't know if it's working particularly well. I haven't seen any data around it, but I think it makes sense.
It's a good idea.
We've added a sort of special event within our main conferences the evening before, and it's only open to people with a specific job title, and we limited it to 80 in Berlin, probably maybe about the same numbers when we get back to the US. And we've broken down immediately into working groups on topics that we know are critical to everybody. And then we're using that to sort of recycle the information out as general information for the rest of the industry. That's proved to be very popular. And it's good to have to say to people, sorry, we just can't get you in the room.
Yeah.
So that's worked very well too.
Great. Anything we haven't covered yet? Folks are looking for any trends anyone else has heard about that we haven't already covered? Maybe. Oh, yeah.
I've got a quick question. In terms of on-demand marketing, what's been your experience with that? Has that cannibalized any of the in-person attendance at events? It's something that we're looking at moving forward. We kind of trialed it, but with AV costs skyrocketing, we're hesitant to put all our eggs in that basket right now. What's kind of been the best practice there so far?
Anyone?
We did, we had our in-person event in October, and we did our events, our in-person events prior to COVID were 6 tracks of educational content. So 60 sessions over 3 days. Obviously people could only get to 10 of them. You can't be in more than one place at one time. And then this past October, we cut that down to 4 tracks for safety concerns, financial concerns, etc. And then we had the 2 other tracks virtually. So anybody who came to the in-person event got the virtual event for free, but anybody who wasn't able to come to the in-person event was able to purchase the virtual 2 tracks and attend that. So it was like a mini conference after the conference. I don't think that we'll do that again. It was incredibly hectic to do that quickly in a turnaround time. But we'd had amazing response. Like I said, we had about 500 people at our in-person conference, and we had about 600 people at the virtual.
Yeah, I think it really depends on your market, and we're, same thing, our higher education people, we had really good turnout after the fact. They wanted to hear the content. We have PR news professionals, we have healthcare professionals that need CEUs, things like that, CEs. That really helps, right? Anything you can provide them for the professionals. I mean, we have other industries where it truly is just, the buyers and sellers, and the whole value is them being in person and being there to talk business. And so they're not necessarily as interested in the back end on demand. So I think it kind of depends on, what content you're looking to post there. But in many cases it would, at least in our case, it would be the end user that would be the target for that. Not, the sponsors and exhibitors they don't care.
We've had a hard time, I think, with the true on-demand pieces of things. So we'll have a webinar, it's at a scheduled date, we air it, and then we sell it on demand. And the on-demand webinars don't do as well as the in-person ones, and even those aren't doing that well. But we've had a number of virtual events, and we have, we had the recordings. So we said, you can buy the recordings of these events after the fact, and people don't. So it was, live event in a virtual platform, and not really on-demand purchasing.
Yeah, that's very familiar. I wonder if on the pirating issue, I don't think this answers Spencer's question, but I feel like right now it's sort of a period where I want to keep all the avenues open. Like I'm less concerned about pirating, and I'm more concerned about making sure we get everybody we can wherever they want to come from, and then trying to figure out the economic model downstream based on what happens a little bit. So maybe that's a kind of naive way to look at it, but I mostly just don't want to end up inadvertently giving away market share because I didn't have a hybrid option, and those 42 people wanted hybrid. So just a slightly different attitude on your question,
Well, and you can use once you have those 600 leads in, you can use them for upselling other things throughout the year. So that's a good point. Helen, did you have a question? Oh, no. Okay. I saw your hand go up. I wasn't sure. It was the real hand, though, not the virtual.
It was actually, I was waving to my husband.
Oh, funny.
At the train.
You get better.
And then I realized what I'd done.
Maybe you were ordering like a champagne after the opener happened. So yeah. Cool.
Great. Well, we're just a few minutes left. Any other questions? Thank you, Spencer, for that. Any last minute burning desires before hopefully you all go into the sunset with some holiday plans?
Yeah. How about world peace? Can we do world peace? Let's do that. Yeah.
Health and world peace.
Yeah. We've got a ways to go. Hey, Jennifer, thank you. It's nice to hear what's happening with everyone, as always.
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming in today.
You.
It was great, and looking forward to seeing you guys again in February.